Today on Mother Mayhem.
The very person that you are, by definition, biologically wired to turn to for safety and for comfort, also ended up being the person that your body had to try its darndest to protect you from. And we're back. Welcome back to Mother Mayhem, the podcast for daughters of narcissistic and emotionally limited mothers. I'm your host, Heather Gray. And oh my goodness, am I so glad to be back with all of you. Thank you so much for your patience in waiting for the show to return. And I am really happy to be connecting with all of you on another Mayhem story. Today, I want to introduce you to Vera. And Vera, I chose this name for you because it means brave in Sanskrit. Pick a name that honored the bravery you've had as you've shown up for yourself in your own life. And as all of you are going to hear, Vera has gone no contact with her mom, despite her mom living in her same town. As she finds her way with this choice, she's struggling with the fear of seeing her mom in public. And of course, that fear makes her want to run, but she's seeking out support for help in staying because she doesn't want to leave her life on account of her mom. I know a lot of you share this story as well as this fear, and I do think I can help. So let's meet Vera, hear her story, and I'm going to find all of you on the other side. Hi, Heather. I grew up in a family that on the surface may have seemed normal, but at home, there was a lot of tension, unpredictability, and emotional pain. My parents married very young as teenagers after my mom became pregnant, and they went on to have 4 more children close in age. My father struggled with alcohol addiction and could be aggressive at times. My mother was often emotionally distant and critical. There was also a culture of teasing and mockery in the family, often dismissed as quote-unquote joking, but it never felt that way to me as a child. From a young age, I learned to stay quiet, read the room, and avoid conflict. I carried a lot of anxiety without ever really understanding it. Despite everything, I had a complicated bond with my father. There were moments when I felt loved by him, and I knew I was important to him, which made things even more confusing as a child. After he passed away, it took time, but I was eventually able to find some peace with that relationship. My relationship with my mother, however, has been much harder to make sense of, and over time, it has only become more difficult. As I grew older, I started to recognize patterns that affected me deeply: frequent criticism, emotional distance, and a tendency to dismiss my feelings. In recent years, this became more intense when I tried to express how I felt or set even the smallest boundaries. It was often met with guilt, blame, or denial. Reality would be questioned or dismissed, and I often left these interactions feeling confused, responsible, and emotionally overwhelmed. At the same time, these dynamics began to extend beyond my relationship with my mother. My sisters often became involved, reinforcing her perspective and increasing the pressure on me to maintain the relationship. There was also a strong religious framing around the situation, which made me feel not only like a bad daughter, but at times like I was failing morally or spiritually for needing distance. For many years, I tried to maintain the relationship, telling myself she'd done her best, minimizing my own feelings, and making an effort to stay close. But over time, the dynamic didn't improve. Instead, it became more intense. Conversations often turned into blame or guilt. My boundaries weren't respected, and I found myself increasingly overwhelmed after any interaction. Eventually, this started to take a serious toll on my mental health. I developed anxiety and panic attacks, which forced me to look more honestly at what I had been carrying for so long. With therapy and the support of my partner, I've done a lot of healing. I now have children of my own, and I'm deeply committed to creating a home that feels safe, stable, and different from the one I grew up in. At my lowest point, I remember thinking it might be easier if I simply weren't here. That way, my family wouldn't have to be exposed to the impact of the situation. That thought scared me, but it also made me realize how much something really needed to change. As part of that process, I began creating distance from my mother. At first, it was gradual, but eventually I realized that even limited contact continued to affect me in ways I could no longer ignore. Recently, after many attempts to find a healthier way to relate, I made the decision to cut off contact completely. It has brought some relief, but also fear, doubt, and a lingering sense of unease. What I struggle with now is that even though my life today is calmer and happier, my body still feels on edge. There's a constant, quiet sense that something might go wrong, even when everything's okay. I'm 47 years old, and I still feel afraid of encountering my mother, afraid of what she might say and how she might say it. She knows how to hurt me, and I feel like I no longer have the capacity to tolerate that kind of impact. She lives very close to us, which makes that fear feel constant and hard to fully escape. Sometimes I find myself wondering if the only way to truly feel at peace would be to move further away. But that would also mean leaving behind a home I love, my life, and the people who matter to me. After I blocked her, I started having intense nightmares where she was chasing me, sometimes even trying to harm me or my child, and I would wake up terrified. Is this a normal part of healing from a relationship like this? Does that sense of hyper alertness eventually fade? How do you know when you've truly moved out of survival mode and into a place where you can finally rest? Thank you for the work you do. It truly makes a difference. And thank you to all the daughters who share their stories. Hearing them has helped me feel less alone and understand myself more deeply. With gratitude, Vera. Well, hi, Vera. Thank you so much for sharing your story. And thank you for your patience and waiting for me to get back to you. And at first, right away, I want you to know that what you're describing, every single thing you're describing, makes so much sense. What I think you're noticing and experiencing here, like within yourself and within your body, really is what happens to daughters who grow up around this chronic emotional harm. Your body learned how to organize and make sense of everything around survival. Your nervous systems become incredibly practiced at anticipating, monitoring, or bracing, or making peace, or adapting and staying at the ready. And in doing that, your bodies really do have your back. Those are super smart responses, and they're really adaptive to what you've all been living with. Your bodies really have learned these ways to keep you safe. And you've heard me say this before. Trauma responses exist for a reason. So I really want you and all the daughters listening to hear me on this, because so many of you end up judging yourselves for having the adaptations that ended up helping you survive all of these emotionally unsafe circumstances. So here's what's true. Your nervous system did exactly what it needed to do to help you survive. And it helped you do this inside of situations that were sometimes unpredictable or might have felt emotionally fraught or dangerous. A lot of times it helped you navigate ways of moving through the world when everything around you was really confusing or overwhelming. And as this happens again and again, right? Because your moms have this way of creating these situations that happen on repeat. So over time, what ended up happening for you and a lot of daughters listening here is that those survival instincts started to become automatic for you, almost like running on autopilot. So, and you've heard me say this before, but you and a lot of daughters listening ended up learning how to read a room before any of you could read a book. And your bodies, your little girl selves became these experts, and you would trace word tone or your mother's facial expressions or even the sound of footsteps. You managed those sounds as much as you managed silence or the heavy sigh or the side eye or the eye roll, all of these overt and covert energy shifts. You all learned on repeat how to tell when your moms were irritated before they even said anything out loud. And as a result, a lot of you also learned what circumstances would lead to that kind of irritation. So you end up in this prevent defense kind of game, and you're doing all of these steps and you're taking all of these actions trying to prevent that irritation, whatever was going to set her off from even happening in the first place. And when this happens on repeat as part of a pattern, it forces all of you to learn how to prepare yourselves emotionally before your parents even said anything or did anything, or any of their words or actions even ended up having any kind of opportunity to land. So it happens lightning fast without you always realizing it. And this is true, Vera. Your experience of this is really real and true. Because for a lot of you daughters, your moms were both that like attachment figure, that relationship you were in, but also they were the source of your fear. And that ends up being why this whole healing experience ends up being so incredibly and profoundly hard and really, really confusing, because it forces your bodies to hold really hard truth, sometimes competing truth. The very person that you are, by definition, biologically wired to turn to for safety and for comfort, also ended up being the person that your body had to try its darndest to protect you from. So, as a result, that double bind feels so impossible, and it catches you right in your bodies, right in your systems. So you end up becoming incredibly hypervigilant because your nervous systems end up learning that careful monitoring and scanning is protective. It was a way you and so many daughters listening, Vera, taught yourselves how to stay safe. And it kind of goes like this. You end up making these internal rules for yourselves, or you end up telling yourself these stories or creating these little mini truths with yourselves. And it might sound something like, or you might catch yourself saying something, or maybe you've just caught yourself saying something. If I stay aware enough, maybe I can avoid getting blindsided. Or you tell yourselves, if I just can prepare enough, maybe it won't hurt so bad. Maybe I can soften the impact if I see it coming. Or a lot of daughters, if I can track her mood closely enough, specifically enough, maybe that's what's going to allow me to stay emotionally safe. Maybe that will help me not get my feelings hurt when she sends off a dagger my way. But this is where it also tends to get pretty hard and confusing. Often, here's what happens. It's not until the danger actually decreases that your body ends up feeling safe enough to reveal all of that fear and all of that tension and all of that awareness that it's actually been carrying this entire time. So that ends up making a lot of confusion in your head because, and this isn't just a Vera thing, this is a daughter thing. You find yourselves and you start to stop and think, wait, what's happening here? My life is actually calmer now. Why do I suddenly feel so much worse? But what's happening is that your nervous system finally was able to come out of survival mode. And then as a result, it was able to let you feel what had previously been tucked away or put off to the side and held in secret. And it did that. It held those big, scary feelings off to the side, and it needed to because you needed to function and you needed to stay connected and you needed to keep going. You had children to raise and work to do and things you had to do just to survive. So then what ends up happening, and I can kind of see this all coming together for you, Vera, but with the loss of your dad combined with distance, finally from your mom, your nervous system is finally experiencing that separation, the quiet and the peace and the space to suddenly feel safe enough to allow some of that fear that it had been holding all along to come to the surface. So now you find yourself sitting with grief, or you are soul tired, bone tired, exhausted, or some daughters in these moments find their hypervigilance just flares up, or they get super angry and feel filled with rage even. Other daughters tend to get terrified and scared, and they feel like the vulnerability is taking over. And all of those are feelings and experiences that your body has been having all along since the beginning of time. There's this storage of all of this really hard and heavy stuff. But this is the first time your body felt safe enough to fully feel these things. So, yeah, while this experience is pretty gosh darn common for daughters, nothing about the psychobabble of it all is going to make it any less scary when it's happening right inside your own body. And I really get that, Vera, and a lot of daughters listening into our chat today. I need to just reassure you here. They're sitting here listening and they're saying me too. So I want to walk this path with you for just a little bit and keep you company on the path for a while. One of the hardest things for daughters to understand is that your nervous systems don't measure safety the same way your thinking brain does. So, yeah, your thinking brain is going to look around and it's going to say, I blocked her. I have my own home. I have distance. I'm super safe now. But also true, your body is still going to find itself shaped by all of those decades of learning and knowing that your mom is someone who's emotionally dangerous and wildly unpredictable. And because your body learned that that vigilance and that awareness was protective, it doesn't end up stopping that alarm. It doesn't stop sounding that alarm because the circumstances changed. In fact, sometimes what ends up happening is the boundaries themselves end up creating alarm in some of you daughters, because boundaries back in the day when you used to set them led to punishment or guilt or retaliation. Sometimes your moms would just outright withdraw and leave you or fly into some kind of rage, or you'd get dumped on by criticism or some other emotional weapon. So what ends up happening for a lot of you guys is you choose distance. You think you're doing the hairy, scary thing. You think you're doing what you're supposed to be doing, given all the evidence you're sitting with, but your nervous systems haven't caught up to that. So they end up responding with even more fear. And it's because your body's trying to adjust to not organizing itself or trying to make sense of itself through survival in the way that it's always been doing. And let's spend a moment together right now talking about your nightmares. And because at some point today, you're going to have to go to sleep again, I want to go really super easy with you on this. As awful and as scary as I imagine them to be for you, the nightmares that are coming after you've blocked your mom do make a tremendous amount of sense to me. I think they're actually telling you something pretty important about what your nervous system's been trying to do for this entire time. And this is a little bit of what I think might be going on for you. And as you hear me say this and walk you through it, maybe it'll sound pretty real and true to you. But I think maybe what's happening for you here is that your nervous system likely ended up experiencing your mom and blocking your mom, not just as being distant, but as an interruption to the survival strategy that it had been trained to, that automatic pilot move. It disrupted autopilot. And if you can think of what would happen to any kind of system, your cars, anything you do on autopilot that you suddenly start doing differently, well, of course, that system that made sense of it and organized itself around it is going to freak out a little bit. It was a really big change. And changes, even the good kind, are often experienced by your nervous system as dangerous, especially when you're doing them for the first time at the very beginning. And remember for a moment what I've been saying here. You daughters end up getting so hyper focused and hyper aware of your moms. You're monitoring her mood, her tone, her facial expressions. You end up becoming really freaking familiar with her energy, the things that piss her off or irritate her. And then you also come to know and understand her different kinds of quiet or her silence. You know what it sounds like when she's walking. You can probably tell what mood she's in by the sound of her footsteps at any given moment. And that is going to create tension. And you were also all too aware of all of the different kinds of tension that she has been able to create over the years. So you get so incredibly used to watching for these shifts, and you're aware of them sometimes before they even actually happen. And then what ends up happening almost kind of by default here is right away on the heels of that, you all end up finding yourselves trying to anticipate the impact of how it's going to land, how it's going to affect you, how it's going to affect the people around you. And of course you're doing that. It makes so much sense to me because your nervous systems ended up learning that staying this level of vigilant, this aware, was how you were going to be able to stay emotionally safe. So over time, on repeat, across all of these decades, that vigilance and that awareness is part of what ended up becoming automatic for you. It stopped feeling like something you were quote unquote doing, and it started to feel more like something you actually are. It felt as though it became embedded into your personality. And I've seen this before. And I think this is a little bit of what might be happening for you. So when daughters finally end up creating that distance or they go no contact, there's this increase in fear because suddenly your body loses access to all of the things it used to look at and scan and check out. So you don't have access to your mother's facial expressions. You don't have access to her behavior, how she moves through the world, what the sound of her footsteps in, all of those things you used to look at as a way of keeping yourself safe. So your body ends up kind of going, well, if I stop watching her, how the heck do I protect myself? Or if I stop trying to guess or anticipate her next move, am I going to end up blindsided? And then, heaven forbid, if I stop monitoring her, is danger going to suddenly appear out of nowhere? And we know, of course, that there's this other part of you that logically and wise mind knows that distance is healthy. You're coming to see for yourself, Vera, that it's necessary and protective, and you can see more cues that you're doing the right thing. But also, this is why all of this gets kind of confusing because you expect peace to kind of, I just snapped my fingers, not the best move for a podcast, but you expect peace to kind of come right in immediately after creating safety, the second you make that decision. Because honestly, of course you all do. But the nervous system doesn't know how to make sense of all of these new things overnight, especially after it's been organizing itself and making sense of itself on decades upon decades of learning opposite patterns and other things. And Vera, I think this is why those nightmares became so intense for you, because your dreams are one of the places where your nervous system can still process the unresolved things inside you, the unresolved fear, the unresolved danger, or helplessness, or any threats that you might have been holding or worrying about. Your body ends up releasing the terror that had to stay buried at some point while you were busy navigating contact and a relationship with your mom. And Vera, I'd like you to lean in with me on this one, but also daughters listening, lean in with both Vera and I on this, because I want you guys to hear me clearly on this. Being afraid doesn't always mean that you're unsafe anymore. And being hypervigilant doesn't mean that you did something wrong or you somehow made the wrong choice. And having a nightmare doesn't even mean that your nervous system is lying to you. All any of this means is that your bodies are trying to make sense of new circumstances after having been in survival mode for such an incredibly long time. And that process ends up making you feel like you are some kind of walking, talking hot mess express. And also, too, connected to this, I'm sure if you weren't feeling it at the time of the letter, it's been quite a while since you reached out to me, Vera. So I'm sure this is caught up to you and likely caught up to other daughters listening in. But there's grief in this, and there's a lot of injustice inside of it. And I hear that in the threads of your letter. There's something pretty painful when you start to realize my life is calmer now. I have something beautiful. I have a home that I love and I have people I care about. And yet, still, despite all of that, I can't get my own body to relax. That is really hard and maddening to sit with when you're trying to make sense of that. And it can get you angry all over again and sad all over again. And it just only feels right to acknowledge that that's going to be, of course, it's going to be another hurt connected to all of this. You really are going to have to grieve the fact that your nervous system learn to organize itself around fear instead of peace. And that is going to mean recognizing all of that time, all of you spent surviving. And my God, can we just for a moment acknowledge together how positively, unbelievably maddening it is that peace feels scary. What the actual healing, you guys. My gosh, it asks so much of you. And I know, getting used to being at peace and being at ease is not something you ever had on your healing bingo cards. Peace is supposed to feel like healing, and healing is supposed to feel like peace. And it really, really sucks when that isn't true. when that doesn't happen to be your experience of all of this. And Vera, I just want to take a moment here and speak directly to something you said in your letter, because I do think it's incredibly important. You said, she knows how to hurt me, and I feel like I no longer have the capacity to tolerate that kind of impact. What I'm hearing in your words here is your awareness, your in your bones knowing. You are finally, sister, recognizing the emotional cost of surviving what your upbringing has done to your body and your mind. And I also hear here how unwilling you are to override yourself in order to keep peace. So, as hard as this has been, and as exhausting as this has been, it also, Vera, sounds really healthy. It's a good thing here that all of this is happening. So many daughters spend literal decades tolerating the intolerable in all of the ways they know how, by disconnecting from themselves. And what I hear in your story and in your letter, and what I'm really actually kind of happy for you here, is I hear your nervous system. And I think, Vera, that it's telling you your truth. Healing really does absolutely, positively decrease your tolerance for harm. And amen to that one, sister. Amen to that. This is you becoming more connected to yourself. And it ends up being the thing that connects you to your next question. And it's a thread that's been running through this entire conversation. Does it ever get better? And yes, Vera, it gets better. I believe that in my bones. And yes, I've walked you through all the ways that healing is messy and feels contradictory, but all of this is your nervous system beginning to gather new evidence. You're seeing and experiencing, I survived the boundary. Nothing bad happened. You're seeing also in living color how you've become capable of protecting yourself. And you're seeing and feeling how you have choices now and how you've been choosing for a while now. And you're starting to see and know and own that you aren't trapped. That doesn't mean that you're never ever going to feel activated or triggered again. You very well, Vera, might see her unexpectedly and find that, of course, your heart races and you're unexpectedly anxious or your nervous system flares and suddenly gets loud. But also, too, this time that you're in can also be when healing looks a little less hot mess express, less frenetic. You'll start to find for yourself that you recover more quickly, you bounce back more, and you might even find that you're not bracing for the next thing so endlessly. And you probably are likely also starting to find that it feels more possible to stay with yourself and to return to yourself after those moments of disconnection. This is what becomes possible when you're not trying to make sense of your inner world all around your mom anymore. And daughters, sometimes they miss this because you end up just wanting to stare down the healing process and wait for the total absence of fear. But healing also annoyingly slow and sometimes annoyingly and scarily quiet. But healing does get quiet. I also want to say something here about your fear of running into your mom because y'all live in the same town. This probably going to happen. Heck, you wrote this letter a couple of months ago at this point. It may have actually already happened. But we're not trying to remove that trigger or that possibility from your life. You've already named that you have it, and we want you listening to your body on that. What we're going to continue to reinforce for you, though, is that you're not trapped. You have choices and you can protect yourself, just as you've been doing all along. Your nervous system has learned this and is continuing to learn this. And that means for you that slowly and with some ease and support and over time and repetition, your nervous system is going to be able to learn something new here. And I think one of the bravest things that daughters can do is to continue to choose healing, even when your bodies are a little bit afraid. And this community, oh my goodness, you guys, I have missed being with you. It is filled with so many incredibly brave women. And you are in this community with us, Vera. You are in this community of so many brave women from around the world who are in this together. And I, for sure, most definitely, am in it with you too. Bye for now. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really hope that you felt seen and heard in today's conversation. And I know conversations like this are not easy. If they were, everyone would be having them. And you all know this too. The work doesn't end here. The things we talk about, relational trauma, mother wounds, identity, and healing, well, they were never meant to be worked through alone. And that's why I've built an entire ecosystem of support around Mother Mayhem. And you can find it all at mayhemdaughters.com. Inside the Mayhem Daughters community, the conversation continues between episodes. It's not social media. It is something safer, deeper, and intentionally designed to support your healing. Community membership now includes Thursday Night Mayhem, our weekly live gathering from 3:30 to 5 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. Every week, I facilitate a focused conversation connected to our theme of becoming your own best friend. We practice regulation, we build boundaries, and we expand capacity. If you're looking for more than insight, if you're ready for practice and connection, that space is waiting for you. I also continue to offer Tuesday group at noon Pacific Standard Time, a separate weekly support group for daughters who want a more traditional small group experience. And if you're not ready to share in a group but want my eyes on your story, I offer one-on-one Mayhem consultations as well. You can learn more about all of it over at mayhemdaughters.com. If the show has helped you and you'd like to keep it ad-free, you can support it through the link on the website. And if you're already in group, in the community, or have worked with me one-on-one, you are already supporting the show. There's nothing more I'm asking of you. If you have a story or a reflection of your own, I'd really love to hear it. You can send a message or a voice note 10 minutes or less to Heather at mayhemdaughters.com. There's no mayhem without your stories or your questions. If you know another woman who needs this conversation in her life, please share the show with her. Your reviews and shares truly matter. And lastly, a big ol' thank you to Heather Clark for editing the show. She has been in it with me since 2016, and somehow she always knows what I meant to say, even when I don't say it quite right. This isn't just a show, it's a community, and you're already a part of it. And I am so very glad you're here.